Gospel of Luke, chapter 9, verses 46 through 48. And an argument arose among them as to which of them was the greatest. But when Jesus perceived the thought of their hearts, he took a child and put him by his side and said to them, "Whoever receives this child in my name receives me, and whoever receives me receives him who sent me. For he is least among you all is the one who is great." This is the reading of the word.
Thank you.
It's hot, right? We acknowledge the heat of the summer. We do a lot of things to cool off. I don't know about you all, but I like having a pool in my backyard. If it wasn't thundering and lightning, I'd be there more often. I don't know how many of you had community pools or something like that where you would go growing up. But we had one house in my neighborhood, and they had a pool. It was big. They had a pool in the backyard, and it was a lot of fun. And right that first summer when we moved in, we would go down the street to this house. All the kids would go, the mom and dad would have like water, and all the parents would chip in with those flavor icicle pop things. Yeah, I can't eat them to this day for that reason. But something happened that first summer after we moved into our new neighborhood. We moved around a little bit here and there, and my younger sister and I got to this house, and the little girl said, "Well, you can't come and play and swim." And my younger sister and I went, "We've been here like all week. Like, what happened?" Well, we weren't allowed because of our last name. My last name's Swartz. It's traditionally Germanic, Jewish last name. And this kid's parents, although the little girl and the little boy who were, my sister and I kind of were in between their ages, they didn't quite understand. They just knew that we weren't allowed. Because we didn't look exactly right. And our last name told the parents that we were not like them. That affects a kid a lot. Because obviously we were Christians. My dad is a 4th generation plus disciple of Christ. My mom had been raised Baptist and converted to the good side. No. And eventually that all got worked out, and it was something that eventually got forgotten, except for my sister and I brought up this in conversation the other day, because we were talking about being welcoming. You see, that's what Christ's word is here, welcoming them all. Because back in traditional times, kids didn't have a lot of acumen, they weren't cool. Children should be seen and not heard. Their voices do not matter. They're too young to make decisions, so we must make them for them. And yet, it's not the child who's arguing about their place in the world, it's the adults, the disciples, the 12 who had already been selected and given favoritism by Christ are going, "Well, I obviously am the most important disciple. I know more. I've been with Jesus longer than you. I'm cooler. I wear the better sandals." I mean, these are the arguments we have, right? Because he knew it wasn't about who was the greatest. It was about their affirmation of who he saw them to be. And so he pulls a child and put this child by his side, and he said to them, "Whoever receives this child in my name receives me, and whoever receives me receives him who sent me. For he who is least among you all is the one who is great." I think too often as adults we get caught up in the lines that we create, in the divisions that we create to give ourselves a better face to the world, a better whatever you want to call it to the world. But we often catch ourselves in arguments of who is better than you, whether intentionally or not. I mean, hello, I got a new van and it's pretty cool. Doesn't that make me better than other parents who don't have the same features on their vans? Sorry. Because I think at the heart of it all is that we all in some small way want ourselves to be accepted. We want an affirmation that what we are doing is right. We want an affirmation from Christ that says, "Yes, you are my good and faithful servant. You have done well." Isn't it the heart of it? The argument's not valid. We know that. But at the core of it is the truth. That in some small way, we want what we have been doing to be okay. That the track that we are on, that the path that we are taking, that what we are doing is right and good. We want the affirmation, even as adults. And sometimes we get so caught up in that we forget to look around us and see others. We're ready to look outside of our own comfort zones, our own boxes of understanding, our own little circles of the world. So Jesus pulled the disciples out of their circle and said, "This little boy, welcome him." How do we welcome one another? I think as children it's easier. We don't grow up with the prejudicial lines of life that are thrown at us. We don't necessarily understand gender. We don't necessarily understand race or religion or things along those lines. We're taught those things. So at some point as adults, we must let go of those conceptions and those ideas and think with the mind of a child and think like a child and let them come. Too often as churches, we close our doors to people coming in. Too often as church, we say, well, we're doing everything right. Here we go. Here's our list. But are we welcoming them all? Are we putting aside our preconceived ideas based on a person's looks or name and saying, you know what, come and be part of the body? I think part of why this struck me the most in regards to the stories of my own life is because it is difficult. It's difficult to let go. Because some of what we keep in mind, we have in mind for a very good reason. But to be like-minded like Christ, we need to welcome all. You see, because that word child is ambiguous. We could take child out and put any other societal configuration of identity that you can come up with. You can put an individual's name. Whoever receives this person in my name receives me, and whoever receives me receives the one who sent me. For this person who is least among you all is the one who is great. As a church, we've been undergoing a lot of mental and spiritual transformation and understanding how we are gathered as a body and how we can open our doors and our hearts and our minds to the world around us. And these verses challenge us. These verses challenge us to think outside of our own boxes of complacency and call us as people to say, who is the child? Who is the person? Who is the one who has not been welcomed? Because at some point we must pull them to our sides. We can't just expect the doors to open and they come in. Although those that do, hey, I love you too. But at some point we must reach out our hands and offer them welcome. We have to reach out our hand and invite. We have to reach out our hands and say, you are here. We can no longer rest on the greatness of what we perceive ourselves to be. But we must rest on the greatness of who Christ is and how He reached out to so many and said, come. Receive me and receive God, because when you receive those whom you have not welcomed before, you are receiving me. And when you welcome those who have not been welcomed before, you welcome me. Welcome me.